The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
Hola, very warm welcome to the VAR show, the show which talks about all the various major football leagues in detail. Today we are going to continue the theme of interviews, and we have the technical director of football of Malaysia, Mr. Peter Diru, with us today. So without wasting much time, I would like to first thank Peter for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to our show, and I would like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing during this pandemic period?
Well, thank you. First of all, thanks for having me. And yeah, what am I doing? I mean, it's a weird time. So like anybody, or let's say like a lot of people around the world, and in particular in football, it's trying to make the most out of very, very trying times. And here in Australia, things are still getting are getting a bit better, because I'm not at KL, I'm not in Kuala Lumpur at the moment. I hopefully can go back next week. And in Kuala Lumpur it's a little bit different. Football is still hasn't started, no training, no nothing. Hopefully we can. The plan is still to start a professional competition in September, and let's hope that is possible. Things are settling down a little bit in Malaysia, so that's good.
So, moving on to a more lighter topic, that is football in comparison to what's happening in the world. And you have worked in quite a few countries, like post your playing career as a coach and maybe even as a technical director. How is the footballing culture in Malaysia in comparison to the places you have been to?
Well, most of my career as a player, or probably 99% of the time, that was in Holland. I grew up in Holland as a player, as a professional. I grew up as a coach and TD. Then I worked in Australia with the national teams, and since 3 years in Malaysia. For me, the biggest differences is that in Holland, football is by far sport number one, which is you can compare that to Malaysia, where also football is sport number one. In Australia, which is very advanced country in sport, football is actually sport number 4. So they're actually not that advanced in football. The big difference between Malaysia and Holland in football is that both, it's by far the biggest sport in the country, and there is a very big football culture. I think, in terms of globally, Holland is very much advanced in methodology, in the way we make decisions in football, usually based on expertise rather than hierarchy. I work now for 10 years in Asia, and I do see that a lot of countries are getting better and better, and that's not just a matter of investing money, because without a proper plan, money doesn't mean anything. I also see that in the planning and the willingness to really take football in Asia and in Southeast Asia to the next level. I really see that the willingness is there, and to be honest, the potential in Asia is huge, is massive. But we got to get better organized, better infrastructure, better knowledge of coaching, stuff like that. More competition opportunities for young players.
So, you have worked in Netherlands with SC Cambuur, and then in Australia, as you just mentioned, and now in Malaysia. How much, did you have to change your ideology and, methodology in implementing your style in these 3 different jobs?
Look, first of all, being a coach or being a player or being a technical director, it requires a completely different skill set. The best players in the world can be pretty shitty coaches. Simply because they don't have the because in coaching it doesn't matter what you know about football. Yeah, of course it matters, but what matters more is how good are you at transferring your knowledge. That's coaching. When you to go back to your question, if my vision and philosophy on football is changing because I work in different countries. No, I still have strong beliefs in definitely on youth development, which way or how it should be done. But what of course changes and is you gotta respect the culture that you work in. I mean, if I think that I can get things done the way we get things done in Holland, the same as in Australia, and not respecting the different demographic, different way we make decisions, and all, it doesn't work. Then I'm kidding myself. And in Malaysia, again, is completely different. One example, football where I come from in Europe is club driven, but in Malaysia, football is usually school driven. That already makes a massive difference in how to implement your vision on how to play and how to develop young players. And then what is the role of the member associations or the state FAs? So my vision hasn't changed a lot, although you always try to, I wouldn't say reinvent yourself, but always try to make sure that you're up to date with the latest trends and not only sometimes in football, in effective learning, and all these type of things. But to be effective, you gotta adjust to where you work. If you don't do that, you're never gonna be successful. It doesn't mean you throw all your principles overboard or make a compromise on yourself, but you have to adjust to the country that you work in.
Like, what is the biggest difficulty that you faced after coming to Malaysia?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. That's a good question. Yeah, probably the one thing that I think is the hardest one to solve for me, and not only for me, my team, and probably the people that work closely with me, the hardest thing to solve and what is really underestimated in football is youth competitions. I mean, youth competitions are vital for the development of our young players, and to actually get that organized and get everybody on board, and really, show the importance of competitions. It's sometimes very hard, and because everybody knows or probably accepts that. Well, if you want to improve the performance of, if you want to improve the ranking of our senior national team, it starts with youth development. You need to develop better players. To develop better players, we need better coaches. So you need better coach education. You need a plan. Everybody understands that. But you can have the best plans in the world. You can have the best coaches in the world. If your young players do not play enough quality competitive games in a year, you will still not develop players to the maximum of their potential. So let's say to get proper competition organized at every level, every gender, every age group, every level, that's a tough one. That takes time.
So, how is the football league in Malaysia?
Um, to be honest, I think it's in our region. It's probably behind Thailand. It's probably the best league. We have some very, very decent players in the league. We have some decent foreigners. But if I really want to be critical, and I can say this, coaches in Malaysia and players are not happy when I say it, but we're in Nepal, so I'm going to say it again. They will probably hear this again. So I still think there is quality players, there's quality foreigners, but the football that we see is not of the level it could be and it should be. And that comes down to the quality of the coaches. I think the quality of the coach in our leagues is not good enough. On average, there's always exceptions, but in general, the coaching is not of the standard it should be. And that results in a football that is probably not of the level it could be. And our national team coach, Ho, shows that. Since he took over the national team from a Portuguese coach, Nelo Vongada, we had before, he has shown that our players are better than we give them credit for.
Definitely. So, as you said that you had worked in Asia for 10 years as of now. So you played in Europe and even worked there. And it is there's nothing to hide that Europe is very, very advanced in terms of football in comparison to Asia. So what is the common mistake you see in Asia which is holding it back to maybe reach the likes of, like a European giant?
First and foremost, I like to stress that it has nothing to do with the talent of the players. Because I've seen in Malaysia a group of 11, 12-year-olds playing against Paris Saint-Germain, playing against Arsenal, playing against Ajax, and be of exactly the same level. But play the same game 6 years later, there's a big difference. And that is simply because how football is being organized, and I still want to mention the value of competition. Coach education is better. I think in Europe, coach education is the best in the world. When you look at confederations, where you look at South America, North America, AFC, I still think although they do it a little bit different. So Holland has his own pro license, as opposed in the past it was all the UEFA license, but now they approve the license that, let's say, the German association gives, or the Dutch association. They approve that if it falls within some certain guidelines. The level of those courses is still above the general pro license in AFC or any license in AFC. AFC is trying to address that now, and also in Malaysia we are now in Malaysia we're now able to up to the A license we are able to do that ourselves. The pro license we still depend on AFC, but for our B license, C license, A license we have adjusted that to Malaysian way of playing, our Malaysian culture. So we even can do the course in Bahasa, and the level is you can compare it to the level in Europe. So coach education is a big thing. It's getting better and better. And then the third one, and I think again a lot of people in Asia wouldn't like me to say this, but I think it is the truth. In where I come from, a lot of decisions in football are being made by experts. So when I am a technical director of a club in Holland, there's only two persons within the club who decides on a player whether he comes or goes. That's me and the head coach. Not a board, not a president. It's football people who make those decisions. And that is just an example, but what I'm trying to say is football decisions are being made by football persons. It's like in a hospital. Who's going to decide how to operate the heart patient? It's going to be the heart surgeon, right? It's not going to be the boss of the hospital. And I think that's still where I think a lot of countries in Asia and Australia, as being part of not officially of Asia. I see it in Australia. Even this week again, I read a lot of stuff here where you see these decisions should be made by experts, by professionals, not by people who do not have an extensive knowledge or in-depth experience in football. And I think it's a little bit disrespectful to coaches, and it's still something I see a lot of Asia. It's like I'm the boss of the club, so I'm gonna decide who is gonna play this Saturday. It's ridiculous.
So
if that's our mindset, we're never gonna get anywhere. It's actually costing you a lot of money. A lot of clubs run themselves in the ground because they have an owner who has no idea about football.
So definitely what you said, many of the other technical directors I spoke to also echo the same thing. They say the similar thing. So, moving on to another question, which is, I think, very interesting, at least from my point of view. Like, we hear a lot about technical director in many clubs and even in countries. So what does a technical director actually do? Like, what is your main work day to day? Like, many of our listeners would not know that.
Well, first of all, to conclude your last question, actually a technical director can protect the investment of a club owner who doesn't know enough about football, if it makes sense. If you're smart, you don't have in-depth knowledge in football, and you hire a good technical director who hires good staff and a good coach, they can protect your investment and even make a bit of money. So what does a technical director do? That depends a little bit on whether you work for a country or for a club. When I worked at a club, the biggest chunk out of my schedule was just around the first team. It was about recruitment: who comes in, who goes. And I had the appointment with the head coach. I always said, look, I will never ever bring in a player if you don't want him, but I will also never ever bring a player if I don't want him. So we need to agree who comes in and who goes, and then I make sure I was in charge more or less about the financial construction. So I needed to make sure that there was a logical balance in our squad in terms of when contracts are ending, that there were plausible clauses in the contracts, that players were earning market value rather than earning way too much, because one player earning way too much is going to be the first sign that you're going to run your club into the ground, because next year there are 6 players running out of their contract and they want to earn as much as that guy. So I needed to make so hiring I did together, the whole structure, make sure that we stayed within budget and had logical contracts and no surprises in there. That was basically up to me. Of course, hiring of the coaches throughout the club, and I wasn't as much involved in youth development because we had a youth academy director who was answerable to me, but I usually let the whole youth department up to him. I just made sure that we all played, let's say, according to our club philosophy. So our under 12s played exactly the same football as our first team, and we also made sure that the players we brought in, even at youth level, the coaches, that they, especially obviously the coaches, that they buy into that philosophy. Because if we knew, so let's put it this way: Mourinho will never ever coach Barcelona, right? Because he doesn't suit the philosophy of Barcelona and the other way around. So Barcelona would never hire him. Could Klopp coach Barcelona? Could Guardiola? Obviously. Yes, Mourinho with his philosophy will never ever become a coach. We had some similar thing. That doesn't make Mourinho a bad coach. It's just a different philosophy. And we had the same. We always made sure we never told the coach, this is how you're going to play. But we hired the coach that we knew had the same philosophy as us. But we never said to the coach, this is how you have to play. But we knew exactly who to hire. But now, at country level, it's a little bit different. It's more, I don't have any responsibility on, let's say, I'm never ever going to tell the head coach who to play and who not to play. That's not my job. That's his job. He is there for the short term, for the next game, to qualify, all these type of things. I am there to develop better players for the future, so that he can perform better at these tournaments. So I set the direction in terms of football. I have written a style of play. I'm in charge of coach education. I'm in charge of grassroots. All these things are under me. It's much more about future direction and basically facilitate and guide the things that need to happen to start developing better players for the future. It's a little bit different than at club level.
On that note, I'll ask you one last question regarding the technical director aspect. What is the most difficult decision that you have to take as a technical director?
Look, I think that sometimes depends on your personality. What the hardest thing to do is, to be honest. Especially when I was technical director at club level, it's always hard to tell players that their time at the club is up and that their contract is not going to be renewed and they have families and all. That's never, or coaches, that will never ever, I will never ever get used to that. That always will be a very hard part of my job. At the one thing, I'm proud that I've never ever done stuff like that or these conversations through an email or a phone call. I always ended every contract personally, face to face. But it's, I think, on a personal level, that's probably the hardest part of my job, and I reckon, and when you really look at the job itself, harder decisions. Look, if you think and you believe that you do the things that are in the best interest of football and players, then no decision is hard. It's hard to come to the decision, not to make it.
So, again, I one question just popped up in my mind. You spoke about the coaches and asking them, saying them that they won't be able to continue in the job anymore. When do you make, draw the line that, okay, this coach has to go?
Well, again, that depends on where you are, at club level or at national team level or at the academy level. At academy level, you look at coaches, whether they have the potential. They don't need to be the finished product already. You hire people because you think they might have the potential. So you need to work with them, and sometimes that takes a little bit longer than expected or whatever, or you're a little bit more patient with people. When it's about first the senior coach, who's and there's a lot more pressure from supporters, from media, it already becomes a little bit different. I've been in situations where the board tells me that they want to sack the coach after he just lost 3 games, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, but that's the nature of football. I actually said to the board member, if you want to sack the head coach, then you might as well look for another technical director, because I don't support the decision. We were 3 weeks in the competition. What I do look at was the way that we played at the time. This is, I think, 12 years ago. It was at Cambuur. The way we played was actually a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, I saw every single training session, and I see a group of players that still believes in the coach. You can see that when you watch the session and you're a little bit experienced, right? So for me, it depends a little bit where you're at, but as long it's definitely at senior level, as long as the players still believe in the head coach, I think you have a chance that he can turn it around. Whether he has, at some point, he might have lost the players, then it's always going to become a difficult situation. Usually you cannot turn it around anymore.
So, on a personal level, do you plan into getting into coaching anytime?
Well, I actually would love to coach again, because I really start to miss it a bit. Because definitely in Australia, I worked very, very closely with the youth national team, so I was on the field on a daily basis. Now, as technical director in Malaysia, I'm much further away from the pitch, and I really miss working with on a daily basis with a group of players. Especially probably at that level. I mean, I worked we went to World Cups, Youth World Cups with the Australian national team, but even at senior level at Cambuur, I missed that a bit. Because to be honest, I do think there is nothing better than playing. Coaching is completely different and much more stressful and a lot of pressure on you. So it's a different experience altogether. Technical director, I love it. I love to work with coaches on courses or with national youth team coaches and to inspire people and see that they start believing in something and then it gets results. It's very rewarding. But also that side of the job has much more politics than anything else, and sometimes although as a coach you see that a lot too. But no, I wouldn't mind getting into coaching again, but I'm not a big planner. I mean, I was never like that, not as a player, not as a coach. I'm perfectly happy where I am at the moment. My contract obviously at some point is going to end, but I've never ever thought about, okay, where do I want to be in 3 years time, 5 years time. I never had that as a player, never had that as a coach, but I definitely I miss coaching at times, definitely. Yeah.
So, you have been a technical director at club level and the national level. Which one do you prefer personally?
Yeah, it both has his nice parts. What I miss working for a country is that at the club things go quicker. Things go much quicker, results come much quicker or not. There's also probably a little bit more pressure, or no, actually much more pressure, I think. And it's more dynamic. And what I miss is a little bit, what you have when you work at club level, that you go from game to game. So 1 week you play and you go well, and then you get relaxed, and then towards the end of the week you get like a little bit of nervous again, almost like a player. That's what I sometimes a little bit miss at national level, because it's sometimes you have these moments, but it's usually during a tournament or or a qualification, or plus working as a national TD, there's a lot of things that probably should be 100% in your control, but they usually are not. In a club, you have things are usually a little bit more directly under your control. You depend on it's not like you depend on a lot of things that are not really in your hand. You know what I mean? But at the same time, and for both, I think counts that whenever you get results, the one that comes after you gets the credits. So that's no different at club level or at country level. But look, for me, to be honest, that's a totally different thing. But what gives me the most satisfaction if people, when they ever get asked the question, who had a lot of impact in your career or who has inspired you, whether it's a coach or a player, and he mentions your name, then for me that's actually the reason I do what I do, because that gives a lot of satisfaction.
So on that note, Peter, I'll ask you one final question, and this is quite a controversial question. People say, I do not know. Whom do you
I like them controversial. Let's go.
Whom do you prefer, Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo?
That's not controversial. That's easy. Messi.
Why?
Nah, look, it's also probably not a fair answer, because first of all, who is better? It's probably the question is, who do you like better? And that is how do you say that? That is relative. That's a matter of perception. The only reason why I say Messi is because I think it's technical in terms of decision making, and technically and a pure talent of a higher level than Ronaldo. Ronaldo makes also a lot of difference because he's physically phenomenally, right? Messi was always smaller, was always lighter than anybody else. Probably when he was young, when somebody else made one step, he had to make 3 steps. So to get where he is, and with the way he the quickness of his decisions, and so for me, pure football, I would say Messi, but I definitely don't want to sell Ronaldo short. But I think that's also a little bit more because of course, the guy, great, exceptional decision-making skills, technically, of course, good. But yeah, he is physically also phenomenally, of course. Messi never had that.
So I'll ask you one more easier then. This is, or maybe even harder, depending. Whom do you prefer, Rene, Mikkelsen or Johan Cruyff?
Oh my God! Wow. Probably as a coach, I think Mikkelsen. As a person, probably Cruyff, and as a player, definitely Cruyff.
So on that note, Peter, thank you so much for talking to me, and I wish you all the best. Okay, please say me.
Both had an incredible impact on Dutch coaches, by the way, and Dutch football. So yeah.
Okay. Then, if you wanted to say, if you had to choose one, like suppose you had to hire for maybe Malaysia tomorrow head coach, whom would you hire out of the two?
I would go for Cruyff. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for talking to me, Peter, and I wish you all the best for your future with Malaysia, and maybe after that, whichever club you go to or country you go to, and all the best. Take care and stay safe.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.